or what I tell people who want to get into franchising is do your due diligence, right? If you're serious about it, then you have to take multiple steps.
Right.
And there's still time to say yes or no along the way. Don't isolate yourself, right? Work and be mentored by someone who has done it before you. The roadmap is there.
Yep.
Your benevolent side that says this person is crying out for help, right? And this person looks to me as a leader and a boss to say, what can you do for me? How can you help me? So that's the toughest part, right?
Yeah.
To be able to balance it on a regular basis. And fortunately, I was able to make sure that my staff and the people that worked for me got the best of me in a way that helped them.
Yo, welcome to the Franchise Blueprint, where each week we bring you stories from the trenches of ordinary people just like you and I who've utilized the Franchise Blueprint as a path to business ownership and financial freedom. I'm your co-host, Mick, aka Mick the Marketer, aka Uncle Mick. And as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime, multi-unit franchisee, multi-brand franchise owner, Mr. Phillip Jones. How you doing today, Phil?
Doing really good. Excited to speak to Kenny here and learn more about his journey.
All right, so everyone out there, you don't want to miss today. We got a special treat for you. We're bringing you a true legend of the franchising game today. Over 40 years experience in the franchising game. If you've ever been hungry, driving down the street, looking for something fast to eat, thought about a Big Mac, filet of fish, quarter pounder, French fries, icy Coke, milkshake, a sundae, or apple pie, we got the man for you today, Mr. Kenneth Manning. How you doing today, Kenny?
Well, I'm doing wonderful, Mick. Thanks for that introduction. A little over the top, but I'm okay with it. I did it for a long time, so thank you.
All right, so right off the rip, can you tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you got started in the franchising game?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was born and raised in New York, in the South Bronx, and we moved to Queens when I was 12, almost 13 years of age. And a few years later, they opened up this McDonald's literally 4 blocks from my house. And so, McDonald's was growing at the time in the mid-'70s. So I thought about it, but I had a little part-time job. Didn't really go after the job. Well, one day my sister comes home and her best friend and said they just got a job at McDonald's. And I was like, really? So I begged my sister, believe it or not, to go and ask the manager, could he hire me? And so she came back and said there were no more jobs. I was too late. But he reconsidered and he hired me. I was the last person to be hired, and they hired me to wash the dishes. So I started washing dishes at McDonald's September 21st, 1976.
Wow.
At just turned 16 years of age. That's where I got my start. A couple of years of high school, went to college, a couple of years in college, got into a terrible car accident in 1980 and fractured my spine. And at that point, between my back being broke and the pain that I was in all day, I dropped out of college and decided to work full-time at McDonald's. And the rest is history. I went full-time to finally pursue a career in ownership because my store manager who hired me went off to Philadelphia in 1981 or 1980 to become an owner. And when I saw someone that looked like me go from being a general manager to owning a couple of restaurants in Philadelphia, the rest was, history in terms of what my vision was going to look like for me going forward. And then after dropping out of college, I said, well, if I don't make something out of this McDonald's career, I'm really going to hear it from my mother. Right?
Right.
So I had to make something out of this McDonald's career, So I started, the process at an early age.
Okay. So let me take a step back. So you started off all the way at the bottom, what someone would consider, kind of no path to ownership.
Oh, yeah.
What was that progression like for you, starting as a dishwasher, but then, you saw someone that inspired you, but, it had to be progressive steps, right? You didn't just jump.
Yeah, and so it's funny you should mention that because in McDonald's back then, the training program was so structured, you did have steps that you had to go through just to be a regular employee, right? So I was the dishwasher, but, the maintenance man might have had a higher job than I had, right?
Yeah.
So I washed dishes for about 3 months. I became very good at it. So out of the blue, they said, okay, well, now you could go and work the quarter pounder grill,
Okay.
So I got moved into the grill area, right? Still had not seen the front counter at McDonald's yet.
That's where I maxed out too. I maxed out on the grill.
Right.
Cheese on 20.
Right. Right. And so I got on that quarter grill and worked that quarter grill and did that for a few months. Moved over to the 10-to-1 grill, we called it, for the smaller patties. And probably after about 6 months in McDonald's, I finally got my chance to work up at the front counter.
Okay.
Because at that point, I was now interacting with the customers. And I was an introvert, right? So it was tough for me to say, good morning, welcome to McDonald's, may I take your order? It was tough for me to have so many people always asking you things, but it actually helped me overcome myself being an introvert, right? So I used it as a way to say, I could get better by mastering this customer service piece. And McDonald's, that's what we were about, quality service. That part of it really helped guide me. The structure helped guide me to all of the levels, right? And so it was really, that simple at that time. Didn't know I would end up where I did. It was just keep working at it each step of the way.
Okay. So now we've gone from dishwasher, we've gone to grill. Now we're at the front counter. But then where did the aha moment happen that you can really do something with this thing? You started to progress, but you're still not at the management level, right? At this point.
Not at this stage. So, got in a car accident. I was still a crew person when I was off in college. We worked, 4 or 5 days a week. But that accident really was the moment of truth for me because, one, getting in a car accident on the highway and almost getting killed really made me understand that I needed to stay focused and not make mistakes, right? And I was already a high achiever in terms of, I was a nerd in the way that everything I wanted to do it perfect. So when I decided to drop out of college and go full-time, at that point, they asked me to be a manager, and, I accepted. So I became a swing manager. Probably 8 months later, I was promoted to assistant manager. And then a year after that, I got Assistant Manager of the Year award for the company. I worked for a large franchisee in New York who owned 38 restaurants.
Wow.
And so, when you start getting recognized for the things that you're doing, you get hungry, right? You kind of want more.
Right.
And so shortly after that, I was off to Philadelphia to work with my ex-store manager and become, general manager in Philadelphia, not New York, right where I started.
Right.
And so, at 22 years old, he's giving me the keys to a $1 million+ business and saying, now you got control. And so for me, it was easy to lay it out on a map and say, if I can do this long, then I can get to this step. I can do this that long and get to this step. And so I knew time was on my side because I started so young. Mm-hmm. So think about it. By the time I became a manager, I had 5 years in already, and most of my friends were still in college.
No, I was gonna say, as you're talking, I'm thinking about probably the thousands and millions of people out there working in fast food now, and thinking about your journey from an hourly employee to management, and what was that turning point to actually becoming a franchisee? Once you got to that management position.
Yeah, and so for me, again, to see my store manager, one day he's doing schedules, taking in deliveries, doing orders, and then he says he got offered a restaurant in Philadelphia, and I'm thinking, really? And at the time I didn't realize he wasn't much older than me, but he wasn't. He was only about 8 or 9 years older than me, and I said, wow, if that could, to see the African American go into franchisee at that era was incredible to me, and so I had no doubt in my mind that I could achieve the same thing because it was going to be based on the level of skills that you had. And I had high standards and high skill sets early about the operations of the restaurant. So whether it was how to clean the floors, how to clean the baseboards, how to clean the grill, how to serve the customers, I was very good at it. And so I felt like if I continued to work at it, someone would recognize me one day. The restaurant I used as a stage. You give your best performance when you're inside those four walls. And, outside of McDonald's, you have to have, strong financial skills. Well, I learned that from my mother, about how to save money, how to, save your pennies, count your pennies. So I put the two together and just say, one day. Yeah. I didn't know what day it was going to be, but one day.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, too, because one of the things that I noticed from going from personal to business is that the way that you handle your finances on the personal side is typically how you handle them on your business side as well. So is that what you found?
You're exactly right. And what's interesting, I remember coaching a lot of the kids back when and even today about that same subject, right? And so most people will go to their job and do everything that job tells them to do, to the letter.
Yep.
Then you go home and you got a whole different system.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Right? So the system at home needs to be perfected as well as the system and the job. And if you're able to do half of the stuff that you have to do at your job to keep your job, you'd be a whole lot better on the personal side. And that's one of the things that I tried to focus on. Be good at it on both sides. They're really jointly interconnected. Like, they're not separate. Early on, a lot of people accused me of running my life like a business, but, why not?
Exactly.
I run this person's business. I'm going to run my life just as well.
Right.
I'm not going to take the short on myself. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one more question. Circling back to the manager that was offered a franchise, was that a situation where they had 100% ownership of that franchise, or was that a partnership where they had a percentage ownership?
Yeah. So McDonald's still uses what they call a business facility lease program, where you're allowed to lease the assets, which is the equipment in the building, obviously, and save the money to then put down to buy the franchise at some point, right, for a predetermined price. So he went under that program. So again, undercapitalized. There were programs for folks that were undercapitalized to be able to enter into the system. So he used that program, and it was one of the ways that, if you go on, a lot of these franchise companies' websites, they'll tell you their programs. They may not go into the specifics, but there are programs for entry for folks who are undercapitalized, right? And he went in under that program. Now, it's not the best way to go in because, typically when you go into business, being undercapitalized will catch up with you sooner than later.
Right.
So you want to save and have enough capital to go into business for a rainy day and for the time it takes you to be able to learn how to manage that business to be very profitable, right?
Right.
So it's risky, to say the least. But it's there for those who, don't have the money but meet other qualifications to become a franchisee. So, that was his start.
So I want to circle back, being 22 years old, most of us at 22 years old are smoking, drinking, and clubbing. But now you are a store manager. You've moved away from New York. Now you're in Philadelphia. You're in a new environment, new market. How did you balance between, kind of the social draws and, what you were trying to achieve in your new role at that point?
Yeah, so I was, again, an introvert. So the social piece was very, very minimal in my life. For me, it was, my mother, sent us to Catholic school. And her goal was to make sure we walked that straight line all the time. And so while she knew entertainment and going out was part of being socially, accepted, right?
Right.
There was a balance. And so when I woke up, I was supposed to handle my chores, I was supposed to handle my homework, I was supposed to handle my schoolwork. There were things that I had to do. So when I got a job, I had to handle my business at that job. That's the way my mother raised us. And so for me to do it, when someone gives you the keys to their business and say you in charge of this business, then you got to take it very seriously. And so everything else somewhat now becomes secondary, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to learn to balance it, right? Because you can't put everything into something and kill yourself. But, back then we worked probably 50, 60 hours a week making sure we learned and ran a good business because your reputation was going to be dependent upon it. So you couldn't be short, you couldn't come up short. Right. Because once you got labeled something, it's hard to get rid of labels, right? So, it was sort of natural, really, to be just in there doing what I needed to do. And when I got done with that, if I had some time to go out to a dinner or a club or whatever, I made time. If I didn't, oh well,
So basically, it sounds like, you got in the McDonald's business, but you weren't out there, living your life, and the McDonald's was taking care of everything. You were pretty much all in. Trying to make it happen.
Yeah, you have to be all in, right? Because when you have people that depend on you, remember the decisions you make also impact other people. So the thing that I always wanted to make sure is that if you called me, you were going to be able to depend on me. Mm-hmm. If you came to work for me, you was going to be able to depend on me. Now, it wasn't going to be perfect. Everything wasn't going to be what you expected it to be because, we're human beings. But my goal was to say, I can't let this person or this person down. And so I took it very seriously, and maybe to a fault in some cases, right? Because, as you found over the years how labor environments change and how what you could get away with back in the 70s and 80s, you can't even try to get away with it now, But for me, it was, these people depend on you, the customers depend on you. You have to be there in a way that says, that's my go-to guy.
Right. So just trying to put a timestamp on this. What year was that when you first took over your first store?
Yeah, so I got my first 2 franchises actually in March of 2001. I was offered 2 good locations in North Carolina.
Okay.
And I accepted it, and then the rest is history.
So just going back, it's now 2001. How long have you been in the system at this point?
At that time, 25 plus years.
Right. So you've held it down. You've been on the grind. You put in work for 25 years. So you finally get your shot. What was that like for you to finally arrive at the point that you had seen someone else before you arrive at? But, of course, you started charging your course. But did you think it was going to take that long, or what was that like for you?
Well, yeah. So it's a great question. So my brother became an operator 8 years earlier, 93.
And this is your twin brother,
my twin
right?
brother, yeah. And so, just having a sibling rivalry, I'm thinking, okay, I started before him, but he became an owner operator before me. Yeah. And that was okay, because it, again, proved to me that it could happen. And so it probably took longer than I wanted it to take, but, because I think I was just turning 40 years old. I just turned 40 years old. But, looking at the history of when you think you're ready for something, really only God knows. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So I always lived my life like that. You wake up at Christmas and you think every toy that you want is going to be under that tree, right?
Right.
And you get down there and you say, man, I only got 2 of the 5 that I want. We all been there, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, that was another one of those goals that, I said, yeah, you always want it to happen at a certain time, but you really don't know. The man upstairs is the only one that knows when something in your life is going to happen.
Right. So, but, to your point, you go under the tree, you think you're getting one thing, but you actually got 2 stores, at your start.
I was shocked. But, again, they had a plan, and that was their plan. And, for me at the time, it was okay. Like I said, somebody puts something in front of you, you get going. And you go and you start to go at it the best way you know how. And fortunately for me, I had a lot of great teachers along the way. I had solid businessmen that showed me and helped me and was very transparent about how things worked. And I think that's what's missing today, right? There's a lot of ways to do things in business. Right. There's a lot of ways to enter into franchising or any business, right? Mm-hmm. And when you go to get someone to mentor you, a lot of times they'll be a little standoffish and, may not tell you all of the ins and outs. I always had people that was 100% full disclosure.
Right.
And that's why I've learned to be that way. And that's why I said, I can give you what I can give you, but if I can't give you something, I'm going to tell you I can't give you that. And right today it's because I'm in pending litigation with McDonald's. But as it relates to what people need to know about how to start and run a business, you get everything that I got.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold anything back. That's what helped me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I respect that a lot because I'm the same way. And, I think about when I started and the fact that, there wasn't a lot of support and you had to kind of just figure it out, right? Another question I'm thinking about is, your brother started 8 years before you, and then you started. Was that through that same program?
Actually, he did get his store under the BFL program, his first store. And then he exercised his BFL 2 years or 3 years after he got the restaurant. So, which means he went and saved the money. They set the purchase price, and then he bought it what we call into a traditional arrangement, where now he owns the franchise with a 20-year lease on it and so forth. So yeah, he started under that same program. I went in and I didn't start under that program. I went in and financed, my deal right from the start and was able to get what we call a traditional arrangement, which is you go and you buy the store, you pay the money for the store, and then, you get to paying your bank back, which is a 7-year loan. So that BFL program gives McDonald's an opportunity to give you 3 years to get the money to put down or see if you even qualify to continue on. So, it's a great program. It helps those that have the talent but not the resources to get in.
So are these type of programs, are these for individuals that are already in the McDonald's system?
Both.
Okay, both. So it's someone on the outside who's looking, and they see maybe the requirements of McDonald's, would you recommend that they stop there? Or they kind of dig a little bit deeper?
Well, so the one thing about websites, right? They'll give you the information to sell a franchise, and they're governed by the information that they give, right? So they have to be, transparent. They can't show and display their business in 100% glowing light, right? Like this is, they can't say anything that they guarantee, right? As you know, the franchise disclosure document will be given to you so that you can still make a decision before you pay any money. Or what I tell people who want to get into franchising is do your due diligence, right? If you're serious about it, then you have to take multiple steps.
Right.
And there's still time to say yes or no along the way. But if you don't take the first step, you'll never get to the second step, the third step, and the fourth step. I think a lot of times they want to know all the steps, and you give me the way to do it, and then I can make the decision. It just doesn't work that way. You got to be able to show that you're committed to this brand, and they'll give you the information at the times that it's necessary to get it.
Right.
You ain't gonna get it all up front.
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for. They want the sure bet, the sure answer up front.
Exactly.
You're not gonna get that.
Yeah. I remember being, 27 years old, looking into franchising and thinking, okay, liquidity wise, it says this on McDonald's website.
Oh yeah.
So I had to kind of find
that's a real
something.
number.
So to your point, I had to find something that kind of more so fit in my range. But I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at too. So you're saying that, yes, that's a real number, but there may be other programs.
That's correct. And so what I tell people is understand the real number.
Yeah.
That is the optimum way or the best way to get in. But don't not do your due diligence about the other ways.
Okay.
Right? Because I always had this philosophy, if you tell me no, it's okay. Because no just means not right now.
Right.
Right. That's what no means to me.
Yeah.
Those doesn't mean I'm not qualified or I'm not or I'm bad or whatever. It just tells me not right now. And so you tell me no, hopefully you tell me what I got to do to get there. And then I start working on that piece.
And you've been around a long time, so I know you've seen different structures and scenarios.
Yeah.
Any other structures or scenarios you can see where people have become franchisees, maybe outside of those programs?
No, it's fairly straightforward, right?
Okay.
So, if you're going to come in, you're going to come in one of those two ways, in what we call the traditional way with the 25 to 40% down, or you're going to go into a BFL program. Whether you're a company employee or a licensee employee or someone off the street, that from a financial standpoint is the qualification. Now, there are obviously other qualifications. If you're an outsider coming in, and McDonald's is looking for what other skill sets you bring to the table, right? So you're being interviewed about your business background and all of those types of things that help them decide whether to bring you into the system. If you're in the system, then obviously they're going to look at your record inside of the system. So how do you run stores? How do you operate, with your people? What's your business philosophy? Does it align with the company philosophy and where they're heading? So, really when you're inside the business, I think a lot of people think you have a bigger advantage, and actually you don't, because you're being judged on real data, right?
Right.
Coming outside of the system, there's no data to judge you, right? It's just your personal background and then your business, wherever you work, whether you work at a hospital, whether you work for IBM, they look at that piece. But when you're in the system, they're actually looking at how you manage these restaurants inside of the system.
Gotcha.
And you're going to have to be doing that at a high level.
Right.
Yep.
So I want to jump back to, you in your first two locations. How large is your operation in terms of how many employees you have at this point, and how were you structured?
Yeah, so first two was interesting. It was in a rural area in North Carolina. Those restaurants probably had 35 to 50 employees, which at the time, was probably the average number of employees per restaurant. Today, I'm sure the average is a lot higher because of the kind of volume they're doing today. And then for me, it was me and my wife at the time, and she was in there running one store, and I was in there running one store. We had no store manager. Matter of fact, we had no managers at all. Wow. So it was so interesting. I had to go in and hold on to a couple of McDonald's managers, and then hurry up and find out who wanted to be a manager, and hurry up and try to get them to open and close and train them. But I was good at that part. So it was easy for me to identify the folks and then say, okay, I'm going to teach you how to be a good manager. And it requires a lot of time,
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, we weren't in an area, an environment where it was very difficult to operate. So that helped. If I had been in a area where it was very difficult to operate, I would have had to have seasoned managers from the start to help me get started. And so you look up 2-3 years gone by, and one of the things that I'm most proud of is, I remember I was in a manufacturing area or a textile area in North Carolina. So a lot of the factories at that time was closing. So McDonald's or the service industry was starting to come in. So I was able to move people away from manufacturing and textiles and working in that factory, where you had a seat. Mother had this seat, your grandmother had this seat. Now you go and you get that seat and you're, on that assembly line, like, forever, because there's no other industry there. When the service industry came in, then, I was proud that I was able to now offer people management jobs.
Right.
And be able to take people away from, production and then into management. And, and I look back and see, I remember one of my first managers, when I went in and raised the pay, she was like, Ken, all I want is 50 more cents an hour. And I was like, really? Well, that's easy. I was going to give you $1 more an hour. And I ended up moving it to the $1 more hour. But I wanted her to go into management. She was very good, and she went into management. I look back 20 plus years later, she's, still in management, making, 70, 75, 85,000 a year, doing well. You know, and those are the stories that, don't get told enough.
What's the average unit volume of a McDonald's? And I mean, I guess you were around for a long period of time, so how has that evolved? Yeah,
so when I first got in as an operator, it was around $1.5 million. Today it's about 3.3 million, maybe 3.5 million range, average unit volume.
Okay.
US, yeah.
Okay. And I know all this is probably disclosed in the FDD, but franchise disclosure document.
Yeah.
But what's a typical margin on that 3.5?
I haven't seen the most recent FDD, but just feedback from some of my friends that are still in the system. The margins are still tough, right? So as you know, in business, food costs, the headwinds around food costs, around insurance costs, around labor costs, is been incredible. The fight to raise the minimum wage has had an impact. Obviously, the pandemic has hurt. So I don't know what the exact margins. So what I'm hearing and reading, that's public information, that cash flow is good, but it's down.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at their McDonald's recent report, I think U.S. sales was up 4 or 5%. Global sales was up, probably 8%. So sales are still growing, not as rapidly as it was, but they're back to post-pandemic levels from a company standpoint, profit-wise, and then the operators. It's always about how fast is cash flow growing versus expenses, and so they're being challenged by that in a big way. You probably saw the article that's been hot on Facebook and TikTok about menu board pricing, where menu board pricing is just in some areas out of control.
Yeah.
I mean, $18 for a Big Mac meal.
Wow. Yeah.
Up in Connecticut. I mean, it's starting to stress some of the consumers that frequent McDonald's quite a bit. So to answer your question, it's an ongoing battle for profitability. Now, does McDonald's have strong cash flow and high profits? Yes. Relatively speaking, right? But a lot of it's driven by average unit.
So you mean you could basically do 3.5 million and still struggle from a profit?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
depending on the location. Because if you do 3.5 million up in the DC market where expenses are higher, or in the New York market, that might be considered a low volume store up there. You do 3.5 million down here in this market, you have probably a little bit more margin. But because of labor costs all over the country, think about the California guys who have a $20 minimum wage now.
Yeah.
If you have a $3.5 million store, how high do you have to raise menu prices to maintain margins, right? And insurance, these areas that are getting killed from an insurance standpoint, those costs are being raised a lot faster than what you can grow the cash flow to. So, the FDD doesn't break it down per region, but I would imagine those guys out there are struggling.
Yeah. So I want to, just for our listeners out there, what we're talking about is, revenue does not equal money that you put into your pocket. So sometimes, sometimes people are looking at this and they're like, wow, you guys are bringing in a whole lot of money, but they're not considering what you just described, all the costs out there. So for every dollar that you bring in revenue, of course, that dollar gets broken down with all of your expenses, your food costs, your labor costs, your insurance, all the other things that you have to pay for to keep your operation going. And then what you have at the bottom is actually what you get to put in your pocket. And that varies per market. It varies depending on what location you is. So there are a lot of factors involved.
So let me make one correction in your statement. What you put at the bottom, don't forget about Uncle Sam.
Oh, yeah. Well, taxes. Yeah, you're right.
So Uncle Sam is raising his prices too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, remember there was a big tax bill that passed, right?
Yeah.
And so taxes are going up, and so when you add the taxes and then let's also add in the reinvestments that franchisors are requiring reinvestments on a much more frequent basis.
Yeah.
And the equipment and the things that you have to put in is with all this new technology that they're requiring to put in, it's costing a pretty penny, right? And
So wait, the playground isn't free?
No.
None of those slides or any of that stuff doesn't come with?
No, it's the costs are incredible, and even the ongoing costs. Because if you, as you know, you put in a POS system, it's a monthly subscription fee to maintain it, to update the software. Like it's not a one-time cost, so it's the cost to buy it and it's the cost to maintain it. All those. I remember back in when I first became an operator, the technology cost was $250 a year. I'm hearing it's $25,000 a year per store now.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, definitely.
Wow. So going back again, you're at 2 now, but you definitely didn't stop there.
Yeah.
What was the next phase of your expansion, and how did you approach that to ultimately get to your goal?
Yeah. So I didn't necessarily have a goal on numbers of stores, but the system obviously had an idea of where I needed to be. We picked up a third store, and 3 years later, a store that was up the street. I did, by the way, get that store on the BFL program.
Okay.
The store needed to be rebuilt, and we leased it until we tore it down, rebuilt it, and then paid for everything on financing. When I did the rebuild. So yes, my third store was under that program, and then we had those for 3 or 4 years, all 3 stores. I looked up one day and they wanted me to purchase, a bunch of stores here in the Atlanta market, 15 to be exact. At one time, it started out as a 10-store deal, then they wanted it to be a 15-store deal. That's all I'll say about that, but I did that in December 2009. So about 8 years after I became an operator, I sold 3 and bought 15 in one night.
Wow. So just from an operational standpoint, that's a big difference between having 3 locations to now expanding to 15 locations. And I know, Phil can definitely chime in there, because being an operator of 3, actually being an operator of 1 store is different than being an operator of 2 stores. And being an operator of that volume of stores, what were the challenges that you faced with being able to grow a much larger organization at this point?
As you know, Phil, when you go from 1 to 2, I tell people that you're doing double the work.
Right.
From 1 to 2. Right. So that's the hardest to go from 1 to 2 to me. Going from 2 to 3 now, it's in a third, right? So you only add a third, right, as opposed to doubling it.
Mm-hmm.
I went from 3 to 15, so you're right. Multiplying that times 5 to what I had as far as an organization size. But my training, my background, because I was a director of operations for so long for an operator in Philadelphia, we had 8 restaurants. So to be able to scale was easy for me, right? I was able to leverage the folks that wanted to move down with me. I was able to leverage relationships that I had outside of McDonald's and bring in folks. And then the structure was fairly designed really by what I grew up in, right? Because I worked for a larger.
Right.
And I saw what that looked like in terms of back office, in terms of how they patch stores and group those. And then the routines of the supervisors, the general managers, myself, all of the people that play, my HR person, everyone had to have structure, systems, and routines, right? That was paramount, right? So once you lay those things out, whatever you did, whatever you had as a hiring system for one store was the hiring system for the company, right? You didn't make any changes there. So you basically take a person who's able to manage larger number of folks and say, okay, now you were a store manager at one store and could manage 50 people. Now I want you to be a supervisor of, say, 3 stores. So that was my cutoff, right? Back then, supervisors usually had 3 to 5 stores. But I wanted them to have 3, so I had 5 supervisors. And then you just build a metric organization where this person reports to this person, reports to this person, reports to this person. And your routines personally on how you look at reports, look at numbers, look at the data, and make decisions based on data. And I think that's the other key piece. If you're making decisions outside of the data, you're doomed.
Right.
And I taught all my managers that we don't make decisions based on what we think we know. We make decisions based on the facts.
Right.
So, and I know one of the other challenges in thinking about, you're talking about your infrastructure and your back office from an administrative. So that kind of describes the operations side, but from an administrative side, what does that look like?
Right. So administratively, you have to be just as well oiled. So I had an office manager, I had HR manager, an HR assistant. I had accounts payable. You had the supervisors who had their own administrative functionality outside of the operation functionality. So they had their fair share of what they needed to do administratively. So, for example, the accounts payable did payroll, right? But it was up to the supervisors to validate that payroll, balance the time punches at the restaurant, making sure everybody was clocked in. We didn't violate any labor rules, they signed the time punch change approvals, anything from an audit standpoint or whatever. Supervisors handled that as part of their functionality, brought it into the office. Office now sums up all the payroll and then checks and makes sure everybody hours matches what was reported. So we didn't miss anybody's paycheck. So, and we did payroll every 2 weeks. So Monday, everything was turned in. They had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday by noon. That's when I got the payroll and I reviewed it. So structurally, everyone just, everything was a system. And I gave time to manage all of those systems. It's one thing to have a supervisor that's in the restaurant and focuses on the operation, but they have to be good administratively too. Because there's no way to get the manager alone to do all of the administrative stuff in today's environment. Managers have to be on the floors, the supervisors have to be on the floor. So you gotta slice it up.
So you went from maybe like a $9 million a year company to maybe a $50 million?
No, about 35 million. No,
35?
So they were lower average volume stores. So we did about 35 million.
Okay, and with what was the difference in employees?
I went from 150 to probably 700 employees.
Wow.
Yeah, and a full back office. So before, at 3, I had one office person, and we handled a lot of the administration. Me and my wife did at the time to go there, and then I had a full office in Alabama where I had, like I said, all those components that went into the office full time, and I had my accounts payable office here in Atlanta, which I had 2 full-time people in there.
So it sounds like, of course, we're on the franchise blueprint, and I'm thinking about the fact that you had the blueprint because you had been an operations manager for another franchisee prior to actually becoming a franchisee.
Yeah.
So to your point, you were able to see it beforehand as an employee and just duplicate the process.
Yeah, and it's like getting a free education, right? Or getting paid to get an education.
Exactly.
And that's what I tell people. There's so many resources out here. The best is, they always say experience is the best teacher.
Yep.
So because I had been around so long and I gained so much experience, it was just part of what I had already been doing, right? So I may not have been ultimately responsible for the office as a director of operations, but everybody that I managed had to do the work for the office to be good, right?
You're right.
And so I set up my office in the same way and said, okay, the same people got to be good at doing what they need to do so the office could be good. So it was a smooth integration, even though it was a lot of work and a lot of paperwork. But I had a lot of folks along the way that when I had to do that deal in one night, I probably had 10 McDonald's owner operators down here with me doing that deal and making sure that everything that we did was on point. So the ongoing stuff was ultimately my responsibility as the operator to make sure we didn't miss stuff. And you got to be good at it because my first year I had multiple audits. I had labor audits, I had tax audits. I had multiple audits. A guy came in and audited me for what he said was a labor violation. Somebody called and said I didn't pay him. So they came in one day and said, we want to audit your business. 4 months. They audited every payroll. So finally the guy calls me and says, hey, Mr. Manning, I want to give you the results of the audits. I said, okay. He said, well, quite honestly, everything looks real good. I didn't find anything. I said, okay. He said, but I'm going to fine you $280. I said, okay, for what? He said, you know why I did the audit? I said, no. He said, some guy called him and said that I owed him 30 hours. I said, okay, who said that? So he gave me the name. I said, well, doesn't sound familiar. Who did the guy say he spoke to? Well, Mr. Manning, that's interesting. The guy said he didn't speak to anybody. I said, okay, so he didn't call the office? The guy said, no. I said, he didn't talk to the store manager? He said, I asked the guy, he said, no. He didn't call me? The guy said, no. He said, he called me. I said, okay, so he called you, and the first thing you did was an audit on me? Instead of calling me and saying, hey, Ken, you got an issue. Can you look into this? He said, I'm fining you the 30 hours. I said, well, did you see where I was missing the hours from? He said, no, I didn't see where he was missing the hours. But I want you to pay him anyway.
Wow.
I said, bro, I would have paid that $250, 4 months ago. But those are the types of things that if you're not ready and you're not good at it, could be devastating.
So you bring up a valid point, because as I'm thinking about just franchise organizations and some of the misconceptions out there in the public, McDonald's, the corporation, wasn't audited, but you, the business owner, was audited.
That's correct.
And you were liable for whatever happened in that specific business.
Yeah, and that's correct. And that's one of the hottest topics right now, right? So this whole joint employer piece, right, where the SEIU is saying that most of these franchisors should have joint employer status. So to your point, if I violated a labor law, they should say McDonald's should be held liable, or another franchisor should be held liable. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, while they do exert a lot of control over what you do in terms of operations, it's still a legal question. Do they fall under the category of a joint employer, right? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the answer to that. But it's a hotly contested issue, right? Mm-hmm. So I will tell my friends as an operator, the buck's gonna stop with you, no matter who else is involved. So just make sure you're good and make sure you're right. And that's why I don't teach anybody to do anything that's in a gray area. Because, when you deal with the law, it's black and white.
Yeah.
Now, lawyers and judges interpret the laws and interpret rulings. But you don't want to leave nothing open for interpretation.
Yeah.
You want to be spot on. And I don't teach anybody anything different. You know that. I mean,
absolutely.
If it's somewhat close, I'm going the way safest path. I'm not taking a risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Two more questions. One of the things that, in knowing you and, has been a privilege of mine to have met you and, been mentored by you in certain areas. Kind of in our culture, we have a boss, we have a mentality about, what is a boss, and everybody wants to be a boss. But how do you interpret boss versus leadership?
Yeah. So I think you called it out, right? It's being a leader, right? And then you layer on this term that I use, being a servant leader. Right. So to be a servant leader, you have to be willing to serve, right? And to be willing to serve the people that you're going to guide, right? And so that means that you have to be available to them in more ways than just what's important to you. And I think that's what it's hard to sometimes balance underneath a franchise system, because let's be honest, the franchise system wants you to serve them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
They ain't interested in you serving nobody that's in no restaurant. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
Right. They want you to serve them.
Yep.
And so I was conflicted a lot of times where, while, yes, maybe this person didn't smile on that inspection, but, today they came in and told me, what was happening at home.
Exactly. Yep.
That they didn't have nothing to eat, or they couldn't pay a light bill or whatever. Right. And so as an owner, you have to be careful at how you balance the business rules and regulations that you employ on your organization versus your benevolent side that says this person is crying out for help, right? And this person looks to me as a leader and a boss to say, what can you do for me? How can you help me? So that's the toughest part, right?
Yeah.
To be able to balance it on a regular basis. And fortunately, I was able to make sure that my staff and the people that worked for me got the best of me in a way that helped them. Right, and I didn't cross the line in any way, and I'm honored to say that there's still employees of mine from the 80s and the 90s that still call me and won't make a decision without me. I got my ex-employee's daughter down here in college, and if you got any problem, call Uncle Ken, and he's gonna make sure you're all right. And you have to take that seriously.
Yeah.
Right, and so I didn't play with anything like that. These folks look up to me. I tell you a quick story. I'm riding down I-20. I get a text from one of my old employees. I hadn't talked to this person since I left Philly in 2000. And you talking about 20 years later, this person sends me a text around Christmas time and said, "Hey, Ken, this is Darlene, one of your old employees. I just wanted to say thank you and let you know that while back then I was probably that little black girl that didn't listen and didn't do everything that you wanted me to do, but I paid attention, and now that I own 3 of my own restaurants, it's all because of you. And I never forgot when you went to New York and brought back coats for everybody in the store. And I'm able to do that now for my staff. I mean, I had to pull over because I was gonna cry. I was crying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you never. I mean, this came out of nowhere. But she had been holding on to this for all these years.
Right.
Saying, this man who was in front of me gave me what I needed to be where I'm at today. I went up there to Philadelphia one year to speak at a church. young lady runs up to me, Mr. Manning, how are you? I said, how are you? Who are you? She said, I used to work for you. I said, really? When? she said, when I was 16. I said, how old are you now? I said, I'm 37. Okay. Right. But she said she saw my name on the program and said, oh, she wasn't going to miss it for the world.
Wow.
You know, so as much as you think you're hard on the young folks and they're not listening, they are. And they're paying attention to everything that you do. And they're using your roadmap for their roadmap, even if they don't execute in the way that you think they need to. Trust me, they're using it. And so, you know, we always talk about our own children if you have kids, and you wonder is what they do hereditary in the way they act, or is it a learned behavior?
Right.
And a lot of it is a learned behavior. And so when I, you know, was in those restaurants, my leadership traits had to be what I would expect them to do today and in the future. And I got many examples of that. And that's probably the part that I missed the most, not being around.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this sounds like this started out as a opportunity for yourself and a blessing for yourself, and you were able to use that and provide opportunities and blessings for many others.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, for me, and I hate giving stories, but Sister Eileen, when I was in Catholic school, told me I used to go every other Wednesday and take them shopping. And, you know, here I'm an 8 or 9, 10-year-old kid. And Sister Eileen came to me one day. They would give me 50 cents. I mean, they had the budget because we had like 3 shopping carts full of food. And I would go in and put it in the cart and then bag it up and then go back to the house that they lived in and put it away. She'd give me 50 cents. And I'll never forget what she told me one day. She said, Mr. Manning, when you get this 50 cents, somebody needs some, you give them a quarter. And that stuck with me all my life. And so I never worked for me. It was always about how can I work and share. And it wasn't about the money. It was about sharing the experience, sharing the knowledge, sharing the leadership, sharing in a way that helped them. And that's what she was trying to say to me. Just be there for people and help them in any way that you can. And you're right. I mean, I wanted to use the McDonald's system even as when I became a manager to see how many people could I help and how many people. And I still do that today. I'm a phone call away. And that's the part I truly miss.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely appreciate you coming today and sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience with us. One last question. Looking back over your 40-year career, what advice would you give to your younger self that's just starting off?
Don't isolate yourself, right? Work and be mentored by someone who has done it before you. The roadmap is there.
Yep.
You would never go to a foreign country and go in the jungle or in one of these dangerous places without somebody who knows the way around.
Mm-hmm.
You would never do that. So in life, never go down a path or a road that you don't know how to get to the end game. We have navigation systems, we have phone, we have all this technology to help us. So in business, right, you can't push a button and say, here's how it's done. You could if you use AI, right? That's what people are trying to go to.
Right.
But the best teacher is a person that has been there, done that.
Yeah.
And so I encourage these young folks to leverage what we call the OGs or the old heads and let them guide you through where you are, because that experience that we have and we can give is invaluable. So that would be what I would tell a young folk, that don't do it alone. That's
sound great advice for all our listeners out there. I hope that you've been paying attention today. We've definitely been blessed by a true OG, true legend in the game. Thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm around 2 guys that I really enjoy being around and really enjoy engaging, and hopefully we can keep this up.
Definitely look forward to it, and thank you again.
Thank you.